Just within the last hour, we have learned that the United Kingdom and Ukraine signed an agreement that will speed up billions in dollars in loans to Ukraine. Now, that comes after a meeting earlier today between President Zelensky and Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The meeting was so stark in contrast to yesterday's clash that we saw in the Oval Office, where President Trump berated Zelensky in front of cameras after feeling that Zelensky was being disrespectful.
As you heard from the cheers on the street outside, you have full backing across the United Kingdom, and we stand with you, with Ukraine, for as long as it may take.
European leaders are meeting tomorrow for an emergency summit to discuss a peace plan for Ukraine. Shockwaves continue around the globe, though, tonight after the explosive Oval Office meeting. Britain is not the only country reacting today. Nick Payton-Walsh has the latest from Kyiv.
A mixture of indignation here in Ukraine about how their president was treated and acute anxiety about what really happens next, if indeed, as seems possible, American assistance, financial and military, begins to ebb or even stall, freeze entirely. There's been a flurry of activity by European leaders, many posting statements of support for Ukraine. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, who indeed paved the way for that meeting in the Oval Office, speaking, according to Ukrainian source, to Zelensky shortly after that extraordinary appearance in the White House, and also to the NATO Secretary General. The Estonian foreign minister even suggesting that potentially frozen Russian assets could be used to fund Ukraine's defence separately. Zelensky appeared on Fox News shortly afterwards, suggesting he didn't need to apologise to Donald Trump. He didn't think he'd done anything wrong, but thinking that the relationship could indeed be salvaged, and appearing to suggest that he'd rather that sensitive conversation had occurred outside of the scope of the media. But we are into a completely unknown chapter now here in Ukraine. Europe, in some ways defiantly going it alone and saying they will back Ukraine, and significant uncertainty here about what comes next in terms of assistance on the front line, where Ukraine is indeed losing, what that might do to morale, to recruitment, and also to Russian advances. And also a fear, I think, that the comments by Senator Lindsey Graham that potentially Zelensky has to fix this or step aside may spark a flurry here of comments and uncertainties about what exactly will happen to President Zelensky if indeed he can't magically fix this rift with the White House, upon which Ukraine's defence against Russia so desperately depends. Nick Payton-Walsh, CNN, Kyiv, Ukraine.
Back here, the meeting is still a hot topic. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar called it a failure of U.S. leadership.
Watch that tape, and you see the body language of J.D. Vance being very aggressive. And even when President Zelensky responds to him on the diplomacy point, he says, could I? And he makes his point that I've heard tons of Republicans make, and that is that Vladimir Putin, and the Secretary of State has not kept his word. He is someone that in the past has violated the Minsk agreements, violated these agreements, and we can't have this happen again.
Despite the criticism, the White House continues to double down on its stance, arguing that Zelensky is asking too much of Russia for peace.
The way you bring it to an end is you get Russia to the table to talk. And he understands that attacking Putin, no matter how anyone may feel about him personally, forcing the president into a position where you're trying to goad him into attacking Putin, calling him names, maximalist demands about Russia having to pay for the reconstruction, all the sorts of things that you talk about in a negotiation. Well, when you start talking about that aggressively, and the president's a deal maker, he's made deals his entire life, you're not going to get people to the table.
Our coverage of the heated exchange continues on our streaming app, KARE 11 Plus. You can download it on your TV and watch for free.